In terms of the topics we'll be covering today, Sam is going to take us through some really cool ways that you can streamline your recruiting for Hub in terms of getting your data in there, keeping up to date, organizing it, and how to pull people into projects. We'll have Zoe taking us through a bunch of the unmoderated and survey improvements we've been making recently to our experience. Some really exciting stuff there. And then Carol will close us out with how you can best enable your team on user interviews. So if you're doing kind of research at scale, how you can set things up and manage it across a number of people.
Interviews, we sometimes talk about our dream scenario. Basically, as soon as someone does something in your product, you know that it happened and you can talk to them right away. And the exciting thing is that this is actually starting to come together in the product. And one of my favorite parts about working on Hub is seeing how real teams use it. So I'm going to show you some of the most powerful ways that we've seen teams setting up their Hub to bring this dream to life. And how do we get there? There's basically three main things we have to do to pull this off. One is data. That's getting the right data into your Hub and keeping it up to date. The next is quickly being able to use that data and find the right participants that match what you need for your study. And finally is streamlining invitations so that you can fill your studies with just enough participants. We have some exciting updates this year on getting participant data synced into Hub, because last year we opened up the alpha version of our Hub API. We built custom integrations to push data updates automatically into their Hub panel. And what that means is they've been able to replace manual data pulls and avoid having to manually upload CSVs with new data all the time. This is so exciting. And the stories of the teams that are able to do this, very, very exciting. So what are the data fields that they are syncing into Hub? Well, before I dive into this, I will say none of this is real customer data. Don't worry, we take privacy very seriously here. So this is all fake participant data in all the examples you'll see today. But of course, basic demographic information about your participants is important. That might be things such as the country, their location, role, company, things like that. But where this really becomes powerful is for information that's more frequently changing. So that's things like behaviors. So how active is this person in the product? Are they interacting with certain features? And things like statuses. So for example, how much is a customer spending on a pay-as-you-go subscription, or have they moved tiers of their subscription? And that can really make sure you need to find people that are good fits for your studies. So where's the data coming from? Well, it can come from all over the place. Companies tend to have information about their customers across a wide variety of tools. That's everything from marketing tools, CRMs, product and research tools, internal databases, data warehouses, etc. And this API is enabling data to come from many different places and get it into a centralized place in your Hub. And once you know where the data is coming from, the next question is, how do you actually get it into Hub? There's three main ways that you can get your data from your other tools into Hub. Access to an engineer or two, you can have them set up an integration for you that's completely customized. So exactly what you want in the format that you want, and pushing that into Hub. That being said, not everyone has an engineer in their back pocket ready to work on things for them. So many larger companies actually already have their data centralized in a data warehouse. And this is pretty common, but people that don't work on the data team may or may not be aware of it being something that's already set up in their company. So you might want to ask your data scientist if this is the case for you. And if you have a data warehouse set up at your company, there's a tool called Census, which can allow you to build a drag and drop connection between that data warehouse and Hub. So this might be easier than you think. Our data scientists actually set this up for us, and it took them less than 2 days to get it all hooked up together. And then finally, we have a new option coming soon, which will be the easiest option yet, and that is to add a Zapier integration. That would allow you to build a drag and drop connection between your data and Hub, even if you don't have a data warehouse already in your company. And this is a really popular tool that's used for many different ways to connect data. And it's really designed for people without technical experience to be able to set up this type of integration. So that is coming soon. And we're really excited to help teams teams, technical resources get access to this type of data syncing. So that's it. That's our step one, which is to make sure you get the right data into Hub and keep it up to date. The next step is using that data. To find the right participants and get them into reusable segments. This is a new release in the last couple of months that we have pushed out to all of our users. And it's basically a way to filter your participants on any of the data that you have on them and then save those groups of participants. So some of the teams that are really leveraging this feature are creating segments for many different reasons. So for example, some are using them for participant characteristics. So they might make segments for each of their different persona types or use other features of their demographic profiles to help organize their participants. Other teams might be segmenting activity in the product itself, perhaps the stage of engagement, or the subscription or account tier that someone is on. Still, other teams are creating segments based on how participants have engaged with the research program. So if you have an intercept in your product that allows people to fill out a specific opt-in form, you can funnel that straight into a segment and get those participants very easily, or their interaction with past applications or actual participation in a project. That's another way that you can organize your participants. And finally, some folks are using segments to filter on labels, and that can allow you to do things like group together your VIP customers or label participants based on which researcher is working with them, etc. So in all of these cases, the segments are really doing the heavy lifting for these teams. It means that if you have a research operations team, they can filter once and reuse this work many times and do just less work to find the right people for their researchers. And then of course, the researchers themselves are more set up for success, especially if they're doing their own recruiting, because they have a huge jumping off point for the right people. And that lets them spend more time focusing on the actual research and conversations with customers themselves. So how do you make a segment? It's pretty straightforward. So we recently updated this page, and our filters, the filter controls that you know and love, have moved up into the top here, but once you click them open, they should look pretty familiar. And you can still apply any filter that you want. Basically, any field that you have in your Hub panel is data that you can filter on. And once you've done so and filtered down to find the right participants, you can easily save them as a segment over on the left-hand side here. And then you and any of your teammates can return to and edit them in the future. So we're really excited about this. It's a very powerful way to organize and manage your panel and set folks up for success. And finally, the third step in this process is actually inviting folks. How can you click? Thanks. The next step is, you've got the right data, you've identified the participants that are a great fit for your research project, and now it's time to actually invite them to participate. So a lot of teams are taking advantage of a few ways that we have to streamline invitations. The first of these is our custom email templates. Set this up so that anyone on their team can use the same templates in their emails and present the same voice and branding to your participants across many different researchers that are running different studies. You can find these email templates under your team settings. The next one is that admins can set up guardrails around which participants are allowed to be contacted. It's super important to make sure that once you open the gates and have researchers in here recruiting, they don't flood your participants with emails. So you can set up invite rules to make sure that they're only contacting the right people and not over contacting folks. And this is configurable by admins. And then finally, you can also batch your invitations so that you can contact just enough participants to fill a project and not overuse them when you don't actually need to be sending out invitations. This works really well with the segments feature. So basically you can take a segment, save a group of criteria, but only invite some of that group at a time and send out additional batches if you still need more folks to come through that funnel to finish filling the project. So in summary, we've covered how teams are building the dream of streamlined recruiting. We've got the right data synced into our hub. We've used that data to find the right participants and save them into reusable segments. And then we've used automations to invite just enough of those participants to fill our studies. And now I'm going to walk us through an end-to-end demo of how all of this comes together. Before we hit play, I'll kind of set up our scenario here. Let's go ahead and say that I'm a research operations manager, and let's say Morgan, one of the researchers on my team, needs to run a study to understand how our customers are making purchase decisions. So she's started a plan. She wants to talk to 10 people, and the types of people that she's looking to talk to are going to be admins whose organizations are on the free tier of our product, and she wants to talk to people that have been active recently. So I'm going to help her recruit participants for this study in this walkthrough. And if Carol, you could go ahead and hit play, and you can start us at.
Let's say I'm a researcher. I'll start by going to our hub panel. I start by reviewing the information we have about participants in our hub panel. Of course, we have some basic characteristics such as first name right here, but we also have some more interesting data. That includes our user type, our subscription status, and the date of the last time that this person logged into our product. These fields right here are all being updated every single day through our API. I'll go ahead and make a new segment. I'll name it Active Free Tier Admins, and I'll start adding some filters. First, I want to look for user type, and I want admins. And I also want to add a filter for our subscription tier. I'll go ahead and apply those, create this new segment, and take a look at what we've got. There are 249 folks that meet my criteria, so I have a lot of candidates. And I'll go ahead and open up my filters again, and I'm going to add a filter for folks that have logged in recently. I've narrowed it down to 140 candidates in this segment, which is plenty for this study. The segment is saved over here, so I can come back to it anytime. Now, before I go ahead and invite, I'll just show you a few things that I've already set up for my team that make it easy to do so. I have email templates that are already written and set up right here. So for example, we have a standard email template, which I can take a quick look at. If I look at this initial project invitation, it's right here. It'll fill in some information and use the basic template copy to send these invitations out to my participants. I'll go ahead back. My team has also configured invite rules and limits, which I can open here at the bottom. Our project invite limit is set at 10 times the number of requested participants. That means that because this project needs 10 participants, I'll multiply that by 10, and I know that I'm only allowed to send up to 100 invitations. We also have a rule about the last participated date. For our team, we've decided that we don't want to invite anyone that participated in research in the last 3 months. So their last participated date must be 90 or more days ago. And finally, we have protections in place for anyone that is unsubscribed from participating in research. So anyone that's unsubscribed can't receive an invitation. With these guardrails in place, I can go ahead and send my invitations. If I don't want to manually select which participants to invite, I can actually just hit this invite button at the bottom and it will randomly pick for me from the segment. Select my project here, and I'll start with 25 participants. I'll run through and double check my templates real quick. Everything looks good. I'll go ahead and send my invitations, and it takes me into the project to show me where those invitations are being sent. You can imagine a few days later that I can check in with Morgan and see how well the project is doing. If it's, for example, half filled, we can actually go back to our hub table, load our active free tier admins once more, and we can decide to invite another 25 participants and repeat that process until the project is filled. And there you have it. My researchers and I can spend less time recruiting and instead focus on talking to customers and synthesizing those conversations into insights.
So we've talked a little bit about unmoderated research in the past couple of product talk webinars we've run. And the reason it keeps coming up is that we are seeing more and more teams wanting to use user interviews for unmoderated studies. So sometimes it's recruiting for surveys, sometimes it's usability tests. It's really a wide range of different unmoderated methods that we're seeing. But the common thread we're hearing is that teams are choosing user interviews when they need a more targeted recruit, or they need more control over screening and who ends up in their study, or they're looking for those higher quality contextual responses to their research question. And in the case of hub teams, oftentimes it's that they want to capture all of the research that's happening and keep that global record across all studies and all methods, not just the moderated ones. So in the last year, we've actually seen a 46% increase in unmoderated research on our platform. And in that time, we've really invested in improving our product to cater well to these studies. So in the past, we've talked a bit about how we've streamlined the participant workflow. Now we're really dialing in the researcher side experience, and we're always continuing to add integrations with new unmoderated tools. The other really interesting thing we're seeing is that these unmoderated studies tend to look a little bit different to the moderated ones. One of the most obvious differences is that they tend to be a lot larger. So the average one-on-one interview has 11 participants, but the average unmoderated study has 35 participants. So that's 3 times as large. And the range tends to be much wider. So in the case of some surveys that are more like on the quantitative side, that can grow to hundreds or sometimes even thousands of responses. So as you can imagine, there are different considerations and different challenges that pop up when trying to manage these really large cohorts of users. So today I wanted to walk through some of the latest product updates we're making to help manage and help speed up these really large scale projects. So firstly, we are making some design iterations to our participant tracking page. So as the participant sizes grow, it can become really tricky to keep track of where each individual participant is at any point in time and see how they're progressing and actually pinpoint those participants that you might need to take action against. And so we've reorganized this page by participant status. Status is like approved, started, submitted response, completed, and so on. And we've added these number counts that you see here. So, so you can see at a glance the macro picture of where your whole cohort of participants are in your study. So that changes live, and very soon we'll be adding bulk actions. So you'll actually be able to select all or select multiple participants and take actions such as sending them a message all in one go, or marking them all off as complete and sending out incentives in bulk. So bulk actions is coming soon, and that should really help you to speed up the management of these large cohorts. And then following that, we'll be taking the design one step further and adding what we're calling project snapshots. So this is the little progress bar you see at the top of the screen that shows the number of responses you've collected so far. And again, this gives you like a visual indicator of the health of your project. So if you click the little edit button alongside the bar, you'll actually be able to update the number of requested responses and update the task deadline directly from this page. So in this example, say you've collected 15 responses so far out of a target of 300, and the task deadline's coming up soon, you may actually update it to extend the deadline and give folks more time to complete and submit, or give your team more time to send out a second batch of invites. So lots of exciting changes coming soon to the participant tracking page. Next up, wanted to give a quick update on integrations. So our latest integration with Sprig is now live. It works pretty similarly to the other tool integrations we have, in that it helps to speed up and remove some of the duplication of project setup, and it'll also automatically handle redirect links. So, so the tracking across the two tools is much easier. So if you don't know Sprig, it's a user research platform that has over 100 unmoderated study templates for doing things like testing prototypes, product concepts, messaging, running short surveys, like a whole bunch of good stuff that you can do with Sprig. And Sprig's just the latest in a growing list of integrations that we offer. We've chosen to build these integrations in part because many of you have requested them, but also they give us really good coverage across many of the unmoderated methods that we're commonly seeing. Quick plug here for this new partnerships page we've just launched in the past couple of days. So if you are working with a tool that you love and you want to use them with user interviews, but you don't yet see them on this list, you can actually ask them to join our integrations program directly from this webpage. So if they go there, they can apply to join our program and actually kick off the process of integrating with our platform. So userinterviews.com/partners, feel free to send any of your tool vendors along. And lastly, really quickly, we have made some behind the scenes changes to how our application performs for these large projects. So this is a little behind the scenes, but you know, if you have run a really large project with like hundreds of thousands of participants in the past, you may have experienced some slower loading, particularly on the participant tracking page and the messaging page. So that's where we've really focused in. And I won't go into all the details, but we've taken some measures like making data loading more efficient and reducing download sizes and, you know, adding pagination where it's made sense. But really happy to report that we have been able to increase the speed of the participant workspace by 44%. And we've basically been able to eliminate the loading issues we were seeing on the messaging page. So hopefully that means next time you run one of these really large projects, you should be seeing our application performing really well.
I'm Carol and I lead our product management team. And what I wanted to do today was share some updates, mostly new, but some older stuff as well that will help you enable your team. I know that many of you not only do research yourself, but can help teams of researchers and other people like me who are doing research. And so I wanted to share some features for that. I want to share some of what we're doing to hopefully make it easier for you to enable your team in doing research. So the first is we have upgraded the project dashboard to show filters, both to see the status of all of the projects within your company, but then also the number of projects that are in each status. So what we know is that many of you are responsible for looking across the entire organization to see all the work that's happening. And we sometimes hear examples where you might want to know all projects that are in draft or recently launched, so you can check that they are meeting best practices, or maybe you want to see recently completed projects so that you can see if the researcher uploaded the data to your insights repository or something like that. So now from the dashboard, you'll be able to see all of the status of the projects and how many projects are in each status. And then you'll also be able to filter by the project type, moderated or unmoderated, and the audience, as well as the creator. So hopefully make it easier for you to get a sense of what's happening at a glance. This is currently in development and should be rolling out to everyone soon. So in addition to sort of seeing the status, we also know that many of you are responsible for setting the best practices for your organization. And so I'm excited to share that we are in the progress of building templates templates is something that I know many of you have found ways to do in the product. You've created templates in user interviews and labeled them sometimes as the template project that people go and then copy. And common cases that we hear for templates are something as simple as maybe you have a naming convention or you have an incentive amount that you want to make sure all your researchers use. I'd say the most common case that we see is if you have a set of recruitment criteria that you're typically using across a lot of projects. So maybe there's common characteristics that you want to check, or maybe you have a standard screener question like, I want to make sure that the participants haven't worked at my company or have not used our product. So all of that you can set up in a template project. So make sure that everything from the titles, incentives, all of the recruitment criteria is all set up for your researchers, and all they have to do is come in and use the template, and that will all be filled out for them automatically. So the way it'll work is that you can create a template from any type of project. It could be a project you've already completed or a new draft project that you set up. And then a researcher can go in with all the fields already filled out and make any small adjustments they need to make and launch a template. So again, excited that this should be launching very soon and make it easier for researchers to get started. The last thing I wanted to share was a few different features that we have that will make it easier to bring more people into the research practice. So we often hear, as we saw in the poll here, that people who we most interact with who use user interviews are research leaders or research ops, and they're responsible for helping other researchers do research. And one of the challenges with that, especially when you are bringing in people who are less familiar with best practices in participant data and security, is that there's a fear of exposing participant information. So I wanted to share a few features that we have built in order to help that. The first is researcher roles. So we have 3 different levels of roles for a typical researcher. We have an admin, and this is someone who can do research, but then also manage members, add members, delete members, and also, if you have Hub, manage all the Hub configurations. And we have a standard researcher who can run projects. And then we have a new researcher role, which is the teammate role, that can collaborate on projects. So they can't invite participants, but they can come along for maybe reviewing participants if you want someone to see that we're balancing across various characteristics, and they can participate in interviews. So the teammate role is really great for someone, maybe a product manager like myself, who isn't leading the research, but is involved, and you want to make sure that they have access to basic project information. So that's one thing. Researcher roles, definitely recommend using the teammate role if you have people who are less involved in the research. The next thing is hiding PII. So we have a setting where you can hide personally identifiable information, which means that people who are doing research, inviting participants to studies, only see limited information about a participant, so that you can make sure that whereas some people can have access to all of the information, that not everyone has access to all participant information. So it's just another layer of security to make sure that we're not sharing information that we don't need to be sharing about participants. And that's just a setting that we can turn on. And then the final thing I wanted to mention, we've talked about this a few times, for larger teams that have 2 maybe very distinct products with very distinct user bases, we have a new product called multiple panels that allows you to divide your Hub into distinct groups and then have researchers who only have access to one of those groups. So it's a way to sort of protect participants from each other. So if you're interested in multiple panels, there's a lot more to share there, but you can certainly reach out to customer success and we will help you with it. So just 3 features I wanted to make sure were on your radar as you're adding more researchers to Hub, to make sure that you can add researchers and expand your research practice while also making sure that you're not exposing any participant data to any risks.
As a reminder, we think about our team and the value we deliver to you all in kind of 3 buckets, and this is how we've organized internally. So we have a group focused on research experience, and so this would span everything around getting participants into sessions. And so we think about this as moderated and unmoderated, and all of the logistics that go into actually conducting research. The other group is panel value. So this is really around builds off the segment stuff that Sam shared earlier. But it's really everything around participant data and how you make use of the participants we have in the system, whether they're from our network or your own users, how you target them effectively, and how you keep track of who you're contacting, and basically how do you pull those participants into your research sessions in that research experience layer. And then all of this is supported and sort of wrapped around by team operations, which again touches on some of the items that Carol just shared. But we know when you're doing research at scale with many people, things like roles and permissions and making sure that people have the appropriate access to participant data and things like that are really important. And so this is just a little bit of how we organize internally to make sure that we are thinking kind of holistically across the experience. And within these areas, I'll give a little bit of a preview on some of the things we're going to jump into. And so within um, within these areas, within development, things we're working on now, in the research experience team, we're making a significant investment in scheduling improvements, really around moderated research in particular. And so we're currently in the process of making some decisions around if we'll, build or buy or integrate with different solutions. And so a little bit more to do there, but I think we're getting a good sense of how we're going to move forward. And this is something that we expect to really be focusing on for the foreseeable future. We want to make sure that it's much easier to maintain your availability, across projects, not have to update it manually as often. So, people are very familiar with kind of more rule-based scheduling type options and different solutions these days. So pulling in some of that functionality, but also making sure that it's easy to schedule with multiple people. So what we see increasingly is, on a project where you're going to talk to 6 participants, somebody will moderate a couple of those sessions, somebody else will moderate a couple of those sessions. You're going to have maybe 3 people joining, and so you need to make sure everyone's available. So a lot of complexity there to solve. We've actually gotten started this already, so you may have noticed some subtle but impactful improvements to rescheduling and some of the options you have available to you there. And so team is ramping up in this area, and we expect to be focused on this to some degree, probably throughout the rest of the year. There's a lot to do on scheduling, and we're really excited to, kind of pull that out from projects and make it a little bit more generalized in the experience, and a lot of exciting things we can do from there. As we called out earlier in the slides, making it much easier to pull in data from other sources without needing, analytics or engineering resources, doing that through Zapier. So that is something we hope to get out, in the next month or so. So a lot of work happening there now. And so stay tuned to your product marketing emails for when that's available and live. And then another thing we're doing is, now that we have people in Hub organized into useful segments, we have increasingly heard a need to communicate with those people outside of projects. So to thank them for participating in a project, to give them an update maybe on, hey, your feedback led to this improvement, so thanks again for sharing that. Or just, generally reaching out for some other reason. So we're making it possible to send messages kind of quickly from your Hub view to selected participants. So that is something we'll be working on over the next quarter or so. A couple things that are not, here and are not maybe as user facing, but are important. And one of which relates to Neil's question. So I'll just take that now, actually. But Neil had asked, one thing he would love on Hub is, to automate the checking in on how the recruit is going. So basically, not having to manually check if you need to send out another 100 invites to start filling your project, and just have the system automatically, check. If you need more participants, send out another batch of invites, check again, send another batch of invites. So one of the things we're doing now that's, like I said, a little behind the scenes, is we're doing a lot of work to consolidate our participant infrastructure and architecture across Hub and Recruit. For some legacy reasons, we've had some debt there where we kind of manage those things in different ways. And the reason we're doing that is, on Recruit, we actually have some of these capabilities already. Right? So we are recruiting from our network of millions of participants at a very large scale. And what we do is we send out notifications to people who might be a good fit for projects in sort of a drip basis. And so we do it, on kind of like an hourly rolling, like, do we need more people, send them out. And we find that that is a really effective way to avoid over notifying participants. And so part of the work here is, by consolidating that infrastructure and those systems, we will be able to, bring that same sort of technology and solution to Hub someday. But we did think it was really important to deliver the segment functionality first, because it's kind of a foundational thing to know, oh, for this project, you're targeting from this segment. And so we'll drip out the invitations from that segment. And so before, we didn't have that sort of like reusable object of who you needed to recruit for a given Hub project. And so kind of first step one was getting segments. Now we're doing a little house cleaning in how we manage all of our participant stuff. And then we'll look to bring that kind of automated drip invitation system out to Hub as well. So glad to hear that that is on your radar, and something we're very excited to work on as well. On a little bit of a longer term basis, there's a couple things that a little bit fuzzier, but we're really excited to start digging into. One is around how we can support more ad hoc, informal, kind of continuous research methods that are increasingly common in different teams. So this can look like a lot of different things, but sometimes it is, somebody from your customer success team reaching out to you and say, "Hey, Carol had really interesting feedback on the area that you're working on. You might want to connect with her." And so that's not really going to be like a research study where you're going to go out and talk to 5 people all at once and synthesize it. But you do want that contact to be streamlined and tracked, and you're going to probably want to offer the typical incentive that you would want to offer for their time. And so making it so that you can do those kind of one-off sessions more easily, or some teams are adopting the cadence of trying to talk to 2 customers, every other Friday, things like that. And you don't want to have to go through the overhead of creating a project every time for that. You want to kind of do it once and then be able to re-leverage that work going forward. And so we're doing a lot of investigation into how to best support that now. So you'll see some stuff coming there, in the back half of the year. Something in a little bit nearer term is just really updating and improving how you can access and view and make use of all of the participant data that's on the platform.